Our lives are a string of insights, flashes of inspiration that can be the catalyst for new ideas. However, our pace of life these days means we tend to miss some of them completely. I'm Dave Hill, and I'm the host of the Simple Reflections podcast, a fortnightly series of interviews with people from all walks of life. Our conversations are an invitation to reflect on some of the simple insights my guests have had that have gone on to have a profound impact on their lives. So grab a cuppa and a biscuit, join us, slow down for a little while and see what shows up for you. Well, welcome to the next episode of the Simple Reflections podcast. Today I'm joined by James Layfield. James is an entrepreneur and has been for many years. Currently based in El Salvador and currently the founder of two really quite cool things. One, Clearfind, which is a tech-based company that goes into organizations and helps drive out sort of corporate waste. And in the process of doing that, supports his other venture, which is called Awesomage, which is all about shaking up the way that orphanages are run globally, and how these things sit together in a sort of win-win basis. So, James, welcome. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Wonderful to be here.
No, it's really kind of you to make the time. I learned about Awesomage last week. I think it's been running a little bit longer than that, by the looks of things. But I just thought it was such a wonderful idea in terms of a problem that lots of companies face, going in, trying to help sort that out for them, and in the process save them money that they're wasting generally, and as a sort of beautiful byproduct of that, helping change the lives of children, hopefully on a global footing. And I just wondered how that all came about.
Great question. It's a very funny story, very strange, I think. So the AI business Clearfind that helps reduce cost in software for large companies has been around 6 years. And it's something that I used to work with Barclays Bank for a while over in the UK and the US, and I could see the challenges they face. And so I wanted to try and solve that. And so I moved to New York in 2017 and brought together a group of people who had seen the same problem I had. And the business was fine. It is unique. There's still 6 years later, there is no direct competitor. We were doing AI 6 years ago before anyone was talking about it, really. And we're working with some companies like Google's a client and some big companies. However, it was a bit boring. It was exciting, the thrill of starting a new business, but I didn't care about it. It didn't excite me. So that was happening. And I actually decided to go on, I'm interested in, I suppose, quietening the mind generally, sort of across the board, trying different things like experimental ways of doing that through to more traditional ways like meditation, through to more interesting ways like the 3 principles. And I went on a meditation retreat, and it's not something I have ever done before. I may never do it again. I don't meditate. I didn't before. I don't now. But that week I did. And I went somewhere, it doesn't really matter, but it was in Mexico, and went on this week-long retreat. And it was very intensive. Like on the first day, you're doing 3 or 4 hours. And the last day, you're doing 9 hours, which was, all of it was more than I'd ever done because it really did. But what it did was it quietened the mind. I think what's true for everyone is really most of the time we're busy-minded. And so people say I can't hear myself think is like a common, especially in the north of England. My mum used to say that, I can't hear myself think. But I think if you think about that idea, fundamentally, it's a truth. We can't, because we're so full of noise, we can't hear ourselves think. What we can hear is the noise in our head. Well, because of that experience, I got to be quiet, and I could hear myself. And on the second to last day, I was up at a stupid clock like 4 a.m, which again I never do and happen to do. I was on the beach with, I think, about 1,000 other people. So it wasn't like it was just me alone. It was a lot of people all doing this walking meditation. And I was quiet enough to hear something new. And it was a really profound moment where I was affected to the point that I started crying. And I ended up sort of sat on the beach crying, knowing that the thing I should do was to create this new thing called Awesomage, that it was about helping children, that it should be all over the world, that it needs to be a different model. And that came out of me. And I went to breakfast with the people who'd been on that same meditation afterwards. And I couldn't even explain to them what had happened, because every time I tried to say the word, I just started crying. And so when that happens, and it happens at points in life, emotional moments like truth comes through, you sort of know there's something there.
Mm-hmm.
But it was very scary because whilst I have done lots of different businesses and things, this wasn't that. This is it's like I don't even have children. I mean, I'm married, we're trying for kids, but I don't actually have children. So it's like, who the hell am I to do this? Is the first thing that comes out, I think. And so I did nothing for a year, nothing at all. And it wasn't until the following year when a good friend of mine at the time was pushing me, like what my passion in life was, because they could see that I wasn't like super excited about Clearfind. I did it. It was my business, but it wasn't something I cared about too much. And I said, and I started to tell this story, and as I did again, the emotions came back, and I could feel those same feelings again. It was like, wow, that's still there then. And so I decided to start that journey. And so that was the year before last. So that's how that came about.
That's cool. That's really cool. And isn't it interesting that these amazing ideas just percolate up, and you probably weren't thinking about anything really directly in that vein, but it just came to you in a moment of clarity in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It didn't feel like an idea, which I think is the best thing about it.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like, oh, here's a good idea. It's almost like, oh, you got to go and do this. It was much more felt like a calling than an idea. And it's nice sort of when I start to lean in the direction of it, things start to happen and unfold. And when I pull back, things start to slow down again. So it does feel like a sort of path that I need to follow. More than like an idea that's, oh, this is cool, or hey, this would be great, or because it's interesting because I don't like charity. Charity to me is something that obviously I like the spirit of charity, but the way in which charity is organized as a, for a better word, business, I don't like. And so the idea of having something that now is a charity, for me, it was important that it has to be done in a way that is sustainable. And so anything that's solving a problem, I think that's out there in the world, if you can try and do it in a way that isn't just asking people to give you stuff, but you can actually try and solve that feels interesting and exciting. And so, yes, we've got the affiliation with my AI company, and it's making my interest in the AI company more relevant. But the real secret to the Awesomage idea, and the inspiration in the moment that I got when I was sat on that beach, was not, hey, look, here's a way you can do this, and what if you get the money from clients? Because in a way, that's sort of like a donation. Yes, we provide a service, and from that, we give some money from that service to this company, but it's not, the two things aren't really linked in that sense. And so the real idea that came to me was, what if you could follow in the footsteps of universities? So if you think about universities, Oxford or Cambridge or St Andrews or Edinburgh or whatever else, Manchester, they're actually charities. They're, as a school, as an educational institute, they're a legal charity. They have charity status. But at the same time, they are incredibly wealthy.
Yeah.
I mean, most universities, most reasonably well-established universities, have multi-million, often multi-billion pound property portfolios and investment portfolios. And they get donations from people who leave them 50 million, 100 million. And so I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we could take that idea? It wasn't even that I thought that this is all part of the epiphany. It's like, take that idea and apply it to kids who are vulnerable instead of kids who are maybe less vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea really is, what if we can create an entity that has charitable status, but that basically owns assets that generate income to pay for these children?
Yeah.
And so the plan is, and what we're doing at the moment is basically buy land, build. We're not even going to call them orphanages anymore. We're thinking them more like boarding schools.
Mm-hmm.
So if you imagine it's a boarding school for the most vulnerable kids that exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be fantastic education, a great place to be, but you're going to come out of it with incredible knowledge. What if that thing could be paid for by something that it owns? So what about tying it to a hotel?
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about places like El Salvador, it is a place that people go on holiday. It's one of the surfing capitals of the world. And if you go to El Salvador and you're coming from Europe or the US, you're probably okay spending between, I'd say, 100, 150 to maybe even $400 or $500 a night. Well, the cost of living is $12 a day.
Mm.
So if you've got someone paying, let's say, $200, think how many days you can look after someone for one night stay in that hotel.
Yeah.
And so the vision is that we can basically buy some land that's owned by the charity, build a hotel not near the kids,
Mm-hmm.
where people can stay and pay normal rates and know that when they stay there, they're helping. And all they're doing to help is go on holiday.
Yeah.
Because I think this idea of like pattern interruption is really hard. So if you say to someone, hey, you need to give money to the RSPCA, like, why? Well, look at all these poor dogs. It's like, yeah, I've got my own dogs. So whatever. You'd have to do something different to give that money. But if you say, well, do you go on holiday? Yeah. Okay. Great. Do you want to go on holiday in a beautiful place? Yeah, I do. Awesome. When you do that, guess what? You'll be helping these kids. And the only thing you have to do is go on holiday. It's so compelling.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's huge. It chimes quite a bit with how I set myself up, but I'm on a much smaller scale. I'm one person trying to do something on almost on my own in a way, but rather than leaning in and creating another charity, I do work that provides me with an income so that I can give my time away to help people I care about.
You say that, I think the insight I had the other day was, it doesn't matter. It's almost like in the mind of, I'm going to use the word God, but whatever you want to call it, in the mind of God, it doesn't matter if you help one person, if you help 1 million people, it's the same. I don't feel that there's a difference. Like, if you're doing something to help someone, the magnitude of the help isn't the thing that's measured.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Because what I know from what I'm doing and what I know absolutely will happen with the people that you're working with is they will go on and shine a light in the world in a way that they might not have done before, and we have no idea the effect that will have.
Yeah.
In their relationships with anybody that they come up against, and that's what's really exciting.
That's part of the insight, really. It's just like, so I'm talking to some of the people who work with Sid Banks later on this week, because I want a curriculum that's based in the principles. And again, if you're listening to this and you've no idea what the principles are, reach out to Dave and find out. But it's a way of approaching the world that feels really solid and true, that isn't based on any particular religion or paradigm. It's more simple than that, and it's very powerful. And so I wanted to make sure that these kids get the best chance in life. And to me, that looks like giving them the freedom of mind. If you give people the ability to understand and discern truth, and you give them freedom in their mind to not be stuck, that's the best gift you could give anyone. And so if you get the thing, what's really funny is, as children, we already have this gift, but as we grow older, the way that we're taught, the way that our parents look after us, the way that education works is almost hammered out of us, to the point that when we leave education and go into the world, we have forgotten all the great stuff that we knew before we started. And so the way it's about preservation of that and enhancement of it versus a different approach to anything.
Yeah, it's It's a lot of fun drawing out what is naturally in people to start off with, and allowing them to realize that they've got it. And from there, it's like, you can give someone fish, but teaching them to fish is a much better thing.
Okay.
It's the same sort of thing, except they are all of it to start off with. And it's about empowerment's not even the right word, because it sounds like you're giving them someone the power. It's allowing them to realize that they have that power within them to start off with, and let's see what they can create from there.
Yes, it's about, I think it's just about not putting in place barriers and blockages that would otherwise limit them. And that's the principle behind Awesomage, really. It's just like letting them become the best that they can be, and taking this vulnerable group who would otherwise be neglected and giving them the best possible, potentially even better than a normal school, because the normal school has got all these frameworks in place that perhaps are a little bit constraining to mind.
Yeah, no, I can see that. So what stage are you at the moment? What have you got going?
Well, there's a few things. So we basically we did our first beta test in Peru, and we tried that. We approached it very differently. We basically said, why don't we try and find a partner, in this case, Orphanage, because that's what it was, and then build a model around that. And we learned some really amazing things doing that. And we met some really wonderful children that we still have a relationship with, that we're still looking after. But we found that, not surprisingly, if there's an established entity that does things in a certain way, it's perhaps not even reasonable to expect or ask them to change. And then there's also the fact they're not really willing to change either. So that was a great learning experience. And so what we're doing now here in El Salvador is we're basically, we are partnering with the Office of the First Lady, so with the president's wife and her team, to really look at the challenges faced by that country particularly, so that we can build towards this perfect, which will probably never exist, model. And so our perfect model is this idea of a boarding school for these vulnerable children. What are the stepping stones to that? And in collaboration with the Office of the First Lady, we've come up with a way to really make an impact. And so in El Salvador, and it may be true in lots of Latin American countries, but we have got the research for El Salvador, we haven't got the research in the other ones yet. There is an interesting challenge that children go to school in these 2 shifts. There's a sort of 7 a.m. till noon-ish shift, and there's a noon to 4 or 5 o'clock shift, which is different from how it is, say, in Europe or the US. And what that means really is that these children are, especially the morning guys, at noon, where do they go? And the answer is either to work. So it could literally be to work, as in you're driving down the road and there's some children selling things by the road, and they could be under 10. Or it could be to work, as in their parents work, and therefore they have to just go to work with them. Now, if they're in certain industries, that's just not possible. And so they'll just be sat in a corner twiddling their thumbs, or more often than not, they may just be out, which makes them very vulnerable. And so we've been working with the government to sort of look at all the statistics around that group and see the impact of that. And it's quite, it's disheartening, but not surprising that lots of them get into lots of different types of trouble, some of it of their own making, some of it of someone else's making. So the idea is, what a stepping stone can look like is an after-school club, which, again, if you think about an after-school club in the UK, they probably exist and people go to them, but they're not. And yes, some of them will be to prevent this sort of idea, but it's not such a problem. But there really is an issue. And so what we're putting in place is a very simple meal plan. So 2 meals, like a lunch and a dinner. So nutrition, especially in sort of second world, third world countries, nutrition is an issue that needs to be addressed. And through this program, we can address that and give them 2 great meals a day, which is awesome. Secondly, fitness. So again, just putting in place a program of very simple things. It could just be soccer and basketball, some basic stuff that gets them exercising and working out to some degree, so that they're sort of getting out their energy, but also healthy practices, and a three principles based curriculum, so we can teach them about themselves through that lens, some of the subjects too. And then that's the plan, is that will kick off in September. So we last week identified the school that we're going to do the pilot with. There's like 1,600 children at the school. And it was also interesting just to see, we take so many things for granted. I was raised in the UK, although I now live mostly in El Salvador. It's very different. I hadn't been to a school there until this last trip last week, and seeing what they're working with, like instead of a blackboard or a whiteboard or whatever we have in the UK now, push some sort of digital board. These guys had cling film on cardboard.
Wow.
They were using as the primary teaching tool for the children. And so we just bought them all whiteboards. Like that very simple thing massively improved the ability for these kids to learn.
Yeah.
So there were some very basic things that they don't have, and they're not there sat there complaining, but they don't have, that we can help them with. And with this new model, this idea of creating a space that they can go to. So we'll take them from the school at noon and then take them to a second place, which will be the Awesomage, where we'll do these activities. And then as that pilot expands and we see the results coming through of that, we will then start to build towards building a physical boarding school, for want of a better word. And we'll be able to identify the most vulnerable children through that program and say to them, their parents, their guardians, whomever it may be, hey, look, would you like to enroll your child in this? It's completely free, and look how cool it is. So that's the idea.
Awesome. Literally. I can see why you picked the name.
Well, I didn't even pick the name. That's the thing that just came through from that.
That's very, very exciting. I have no idea where this podcast ends up. It's sort of made its way to 30 plus countries so far. But is there anything particular that you require from people who are interested in getting involved and helping out?
I mean, at the moment, you were sort of saying how you're like a one-man band. Well, to be fair, I'm sort of like a two-man band right now. So we've got a fantastic law firm in New York who's actually working with us pro bono, one of the biggest law firms in the world. So we've got those guys, which are amazing. We've got a great law firm based in El Salvador who are doing work for us pretty much pro bono as well. But beyond those two amazing teams of brilliant minds, it's myself and my wife, and we basically we are looking to expand and grow the team. And so I think there's a few things that we're looking for people to help train the trainers. So we need to educate the teachers that we're going to employ. Teachers may not be the right word, but let's use that term for now. Yeah. So the people who are going to work at this first Awesomage to look after these children in this after-school club will need teaching the three principles, because and they obviously speak Spanish, not English, so it needs to be fluent Spanish speakers who understand the principles. And I've been talking to some people in the community to help with that. Also, just extra pairs of hands. Again, if there's people who are interested in helping to just get stuff done, push stuff along, find out things, pull together research, that sort of stuff. Again, if people are willing to volunteer some time to help with that stuff, there's lots to do. We've got some amazing statistics now from the government that need sort of crystallizing into more of a plan, so we can just, I suppose, articulate this vision more easily to people so that they can get involved. So, we sort of anything and everything is great, but really we're looking for sort of bodies and minds to help us move this thing forward.
Gotcha. And those bodies and minds, do they need to be physically in El Salvador, or can they be anywhere?
I think they need to, some of them will need to be physically in El Salvador. The trainers and stuff, it's going to be easier to do that, or at least they need to go there to do that. But I think in terms of like sort of, for want of a better word, like assistants and helpers to sort of bring this vision to life and help coordinate stuff, that could be asynchronous. They could be based theoretically anywhere. They just have to get stuff done on a sort of deadline and want to be involved in the project.
Awesome. No worries. Well, I can obviously I'll share links to the Awesomage website and email addresses and bits and pieces in the blurb that comes out with this.
Yeah.
James, that's been wonderful. It's really exciting to hear a desire for positive change in the world that links into what people are doing generally day to day, and it's a sort of win-win byproduct. And I think there's a huge amount of scope for individuals and organizations to do that in their day-to-day life. It just requires a little bit of creativity, a little bit of thought of how to make that and see the benefits that they can produce without actually changing much, if anything.
Yeah, I think in a world of overwhelm, which I think we've been living in for quite a while, to me, that's the secret for like charity 2.0, for want of a better word. If you want to make a change in the world to something that you see as a significant problem and that you have a passion to solve, finding a way to solve it that doesn't just require sort of getting someone to completely change their behavior, I think is the only way to make a significant difference that scales. Because otherwise, you're always trying to do pattern interruption. And then the problem is everybody's already in overwhelm. So the things you have to do now to do that pattern interruption to get someone to care is so overwhelming and so huge and so expensive. But if you can just say, well, look, you always go and buy a coffee from Starbucks. Great. What if you just buy a coffee from this place? And the money that suddenly is like, oh, yeah, well, I'll do that anyway. I don't have to radically change my life to basically keep doing the same thing that I'm going to do anyway. Or whatever.
Absolutely. It just, for me, it makes perfect sense. I love the vision of it. And I wish you all the very best. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Thanks for having me.
That's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed the conversation, feel free to subscribe and join me and my new guest next time. If you're interested in the work I'm doing, or you think I can be of service to you or your organisation, please email dave@simplicityofmind.co.uk. Remember, see if you can find time to slow down and reflect. Those simple ideas might be worth listening to. Take care, and I hope you can join me in a couple of weeks.